It's like a boomerang. I don't know if any other men can relate to that, and man, did it come back on me. Because all of a sudden I found out I had people pleaser issues, I had need for approval, I had codependency. It just opened up a whole different ballgame for me. And then I started thinking, okay, well, wow, if this really impacted me and it took me to my knees, what happens to other men?
Hi there. Thank you for joining us for the Communities Connected podcast. This is a place for conversations with real people doing real life together. I'm your host, Jason Hopcus, founder of the Connection Project and president and CEO of NAMI Arapahoe Douglas Counties. The Connection Project began with a single goal in mind: to convene communities for conversations that matter. Today, we want to focus on one of our dynamic panelists for the Man Map event. Zachman is here with us. He is the founder of Be Men, a nonprofit organization dedicated to male wellness and divorce prevention. Through that work, he is building a community of servant warriors determined to make a positive impact in society. Zach, first off, I want to thank you for being here today. I'm honored you can share your story with us.
Thanks, Jason. It's really an honor to be with you this morning. I love the work that you do and love the awareness you're creating with NAMI and the community.
I appreciate that. So tell us how you got here.
Yeah, well, I could be sarcastic and say I drove in on my truck, but no, I think the question that you're asking is, what started all this?
Right.
And for me, it goes back about 15 years ago. In 2003, my former spouse and I, we went through separation and divorce. Okay. July 4th, Independence Day, that was the day I had named as my vocational independence. I worked in corporate America in my 20s and my 30s. I decided to kind of bootstrap some companies. I wanted to become an entrepreneur, and I'd spent 6 months building a business plan. And that was my day, right? July 4th, I made that symbol. Unfortunately, at breakfast, we kind of had our last fight. And we decided that day that that would be the day we'd start our separation. And so I would move out. And I moved out from our home. We had 2 kids, we had 2 cars, we had 2 dogs, we had a corner house. We'd spent 10 years building a life together. And I was a jock, played football as a kid, right, who got an economics degree. So why I mention that is I didn't really have a passion for psychology, and the work that you do. Right. And so never been around a therapist or a counselor. And I ended up doing 3 of the top 5 most stressful things in the whole wide world to do. But I did it unknowingly. I changed my living space, so I did move out of our home. We changed our marriage and we became separated. But then I went one step further and I changed my career because I launched my first company. Right. So if you look at that list, that's not really something you want to do. So to all the men out there, you want to overachieve in some things, but maybe not in doing 3 of the top most stressful things in the whole wide world simultaneously. Right. So that was a challenge for sure.
That's a lot to take on. You had the proverbial American dream and sort of undid it all at once. So that sounds like it was the path that teed you up for what came next. Like, what came next?
Yeah, really what came next was, let's see if Zach can survive all this. Okay. And it brought me to my knees. Now, I'm a younger man then than I am now, but I grew up here in West Lakewood, the Green Mountain area. I had good family, I had good parents, I had good teachers, I had good counselors. I got a great degree from Colorado College. I wasn't financially destitute, so my joke is I didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth, but maybe pewter. And with all of that set up for me, that life event literally brought me to my knees. It was so challenging, it was so difficult. I'm an extreme extrovert, and it was the first time I'd ever worked alone. I had a small office, home office, and it was the first time I'd actually ever lived alone. I had lived with my parents, then I had lived at college, then I had lived in a bachelor pad with some buddies, then my girlfriend who became my fiance, who became my wife. So it was super, super challenging. Right. Honestly, I think what kind of saved my life was I got to the bottom. About a year later, I had what I found out afterwards was a panic attack. Okay. I thought I was having a heart attack at the age of 34. And that really woke me up to, man, I better come up with a different plan here. Right. Because the plan I had been going through was the machismo route. I think a lot of men, you've heard of this?
Right.
Yeah. I jokingly call it the old yeller. The dog slinks off to the woods when he's injured, curls up under a tree, hopefully recovers. Now, men are not dogs, but that was kind of my approach. I just really, the worse it got, the more private I became, the more isolated I became, and that was really taking its toll. Mm-hmm. So I have this panic attack, which totally wakes me up. And then suddenly I start calling people. And I end up going up to Boulder and I go through this divorce group seminar called Rebuilding. And it kind of figuratively saved my life, because it introduced me to a whole different universe, you know, of emotional growth and personal development, coming to find out that I had probably suffered from some emotional abuse, probably suffered from some verbal abuse, probably dished some of that out as well. And so out of the pain really came the action.
Right, so it sounds like life got unmanageable for you, and it really sort of brought you to your knees and put you in a position to have to do something to change. Yeah. You know, I think a lot of us can identify with that story. I mean, it's as unique as our own story feels to us. I don't know that these stories are unique, which is exactly why I think it's important for us to host these conversations. I appreciate you sharing that. So after those first days, you know, it sounds like a year into it, you sort of have this self-discovery and this journey of beginning again. What changed? I mean, I know we have pivotal moments in our life, but where did you redirect after you had this kind of seminal moment in Boulder?
Great question. You know, I think what shifted for me was this whole different universe. You know, I had grown up in locker rooms, right? And I had been taught big boys don't cry and never be weak, and especially on a football field. And I actually became the quarterback, so I was quote unquote the leader. So you just never show weakness. And my whole life, I kind of felt like I lived life according to a game, you know, the paradigm of a game. And I was playing this external game. You know, I needed to go get money, I needed to go get a job, I needed to get a woman, I needed to get a car, all that stuff external. But I had never been introduced to the internal game. Introspection. And so suddenly I'm studying and learning, and I'm trying to teach myself about, well, what were her behaviors, right? And what were my behaviors? Like I've focused, so many men I think focus on others, right? I was really focused on her. I'm like, well, she messed this up, so what's going on with her? And it's like a boomerang. I don't know if any other men can relate to that, and man, did it come back on me. Because all of a sudden I found out I had people pleaser issues, I had need for approval, I had codependency. It just opened up a whole different ballgame for me. And then I started thinking, okay, well, wow, if this really impacted me and it took me to my knees, what happens to other men?
Right.
That became the operative question. You know, because I had 7 men, like the closest men in the whole wide world to me, my inner sphere of guy buddies, they all went through it too.
Right.
We went down like dominoes in about 2 years. And so I started thinking, well, if it was this difficult for me, and I had everything lined up for me, what about that other guy?
Right.
And man, you start researching and, you know, Google that stuff. And
the statistics aren't good.
Oh, they're frightening. They're really disturbing. And so I thought, well, certainly there's something, right? There's something for men, you know, in this day and age. I'll just go find something on Google. I didn't really find much. I mean, I found things that I wouldn't really want to be a part of. I found how to decimate your former spouse in family court law. I found bitterness. I found angst. I found aggression. And I thought, I don't like any of that. So I started talking.
Which is a great thing. And I mean, you've done an amazing job at doing just that. So it sounds like you really shined a spotlight on the things that most of us want to hide from. You know, the things that we are kind of our vulnerable underside that we don't necessarily want people to see. And I'm guessing from the locker room culture that you came from, you know, many people would view that as a sign of weakness. What gave you the courage to really step out of that mentality that was so ingrained in you and start doing this differently?
That is a really good question. So first of all, yeah, it felt scary as heck. You know, it almost felt, you know, we have all these movies that are sort of zombie apocalypse.
Right.
I know this doesn't sound rational at all, but how I grew up was show weakness never.
Right.
I mean, literally, ever. And if you do, here's what's going to happen. It'll be like zombie apocalypse. I mean, Jason is a nice man, but he and all his buddies are going to rip the flesh off your bones. and of course, that's dramatic, all of my teenage sons, but there's something in our ego. What I came to find out is our ego is so driven for survival that it just comes up with really fantastical ideas. So once I did start opening up, because my self-defense mechanism was, okay, I kind of need to talk about this. So I didn't really go see counselors or therapists. I was talking with friends and women and men, and they were resonating and going, yeah, Zach, yeah, I get that. And divorce, it's really ripping apart our society. Yeah. And we start having these gatherings, and suddenly it's like, well, don't I have a responsibility?
Right.
Like, first and foremost, I have a responsibility to my sons. That's what I felt as a father.
Sure.
I need to try and be the best man that I can be for them. So I think, interestingly enough, it wasn't being the best man for me that drove me. It was being the best man for others that started to drive me. And then other people were picking up on it and saying, yeah, I like what you're saying. This sounds exciting. I could get behind that. And so I think those words of encouragement led me further down the path of, we should do something.
Right.
Sort of that righteous anger of, if things are bad, we can make them better.
So to be clear, you didn't exactly start in this place of self-discovery and self-awareness. It was sort of a circuitous path that, through doing this work, you initially were starting to help others, or you were motivated in helping others, so to speak. I'm assuming there were some common threads that you saw in the people that you were talking to. I know in my own story of struggle, and I certainly have unpacked that many times, the more vulnerable and honest I am with people about my own struggle, it's amazing what people will share back with me, sometimes more than you want to know. But it's a really great way to connect with people. So if you were to look back in those starting days of doing this work, what were the common threads that you saw in other people that helped you feel more connected or, furthered the responsibility to do this work?
Yeah. And I appreciate you commenting about that, because vulnerability is strength. That is a lesson I never learned.
Right.
I learned over and over and over ad nauseum, vulnerability is weakness. Right. Never, ever, ever show it, ever. Right. And then you're right, you do open up and people are like, I relate to that. Right. That feels similar to me. And I would tell men, hey, I feel really disconnected. I feel really isolated. I'm struggling here. I don't know where to turn. I don't feel like anybody taught me this. Right. Like, yeah, me neither. In the work with Be Men, I've started talking about the Be Men tool belt. What tool belt did you get? I never took a class on how to be a man in school.
Right.
And so I just learned from my dad. But my dad, he's a great man. We're friends now. He's one of my heroes. But that was a generation where men worked and women stayed home and raised the kids.
Right.
He was never around. And so I started talking about my story, and then the next man and the next man and the next man would say, I relate to that. I have my story. Yeah, I've struggled with this. Yeah, I lost my money. I was, hurting with drugs or hurting with alcohol. Some of the statistics now that I see, it's amazing what's not happening for men, right? 1 in 5 men will develop an alcoholic dependency in their lifetimes. The one that really crushed me was fatherhood. This stat of fatherless. I'm not a hater, but I hate that term.
Right.
There's not a child who's fatherless, but that's kind of the moniker that we're using. And I came to find out that 1 in 3 kids are growing up with no active involvement with their biological dads. Right. And I thought, that's a travesty. That's not a number, that's not a statistics, that's a literal tsunami of sociological ailments that are coming our way. So I was really impassioned, I think. And the more I talked with passion, the more people kind of gathered around me and said, well, how do I help?
Right.
And you're right. There was no, I make this joke, there was no like Dalai Lama and then Zach ascended, right? It literally was out of survival and angst and pain and like there must be a better way that we started having all these kind of conversations.
I don't know if this resonates for you, but in my own life, I tend to look at that as taking the next right step, and for me, like today, we're just showing up for the next conversation. And I think when you really start to look at life in just the next conversation or the next right step, it becomes a lot more manageable. The value in having a conversation with men doing really important work in the community that seems so relevant to me was, we give men a lot of labels today, and a lot of them are not good, and there are some men that don't deserve good labels, but there are a lot of men who do deserve good labels and do good work in the community. I think one thing I want to circle back to is we talked about vulnerability for a second there. It's not a word I love, and ironically, it just came up here today. I don't have it on my notes. But I think it's a label that we have put on people expecting that it implies weakness. And I wonder if we just started looking at vulnerability as humanness, you know, just an opportunity for us to show up and to just be more authentically who we are. And I know where I'm at is not where everybody starts, and as you just explained to us, it's not where you began, and I don't think it's a place you necessarily ascend to. It's that next right step. You know, I identify with many of the things that you've been through. I've liked to lovingly refer to as my own painful history as getting T-shirts to wear. You know, you get the broke, the no job, the starting over, you know, whatever T-shirt
right.
you want to put on. It's our modern day armor, so to speak. What I want to talk to you about from here is, tell me about Be Men. You know, I know that the foundation that you laid in your own experience is really where that started from. Let's let everybody else know what you're doing and really how you're serving in that capacity.
Yeah, sure. Well, initially it seemed like, because we were literally just having gatherings in my family room. Like, it was just people that I knew in the community who came over to my house and we'd have a conversation. And so it sounded like we were going to build like a divorcement support group, right? And just chat about our struggles. Nothing wrong with that, but I wanted it to be so much more than that. I mean, we have that ad nauseum. You fell down, I fell down, whatever the life event is. In this case, it's divorce. We have recovery programs. And we kind of live in this microwave, instant gratification society where 30 years of your life gets rewired in 30 hours on this special retreat. And I say it, you know, sarcastically, because you know, as a trained professional, that's just not feasible. So what happened was it just kind of gestated, almost by accident. You know, we're talking about divorce, but divorce has a very negative stigmatism in America. Right. And so I'd be talking to a man who had been divorced and he's remarried, and he said, look, I don't fit the bill. I don't fit that label, as you said, that we're labeling men with. Or a man would say, hey, I've been maybe not happily married for a couple of decades, but healthily married. I could teach a younger man about that. Or a younger man who says, well, I'm not married, and maybe I'm not even going to get married because of that divorce thing. So it's like, you know, we really need to tamp this divorce thing down. Yeah, it was the catalyst, the life event that brought me to the game. And it might bring other men to the game because it emotionally kind of rips them open. But let's gestate, let's evolve. And so it's evolved into a men's organization. And for me, if I was going to encapsulate it now, phase one is awareness. And that's what we're doing. That's why I loved coming out to be with you this morning. If we don't talk about it, you know, we just pretend like nothing's happening. All these statistics, you know, and divorced men are not suffering suicide rates 2 to 3 times greater than married men. But those are the facts. So the awareness piece is huge because I think all men, what I've come to understand, Jason, is my story is definitely not unique.
Right.
I mean, it's like 1 of 10 million, you know, I'm telling the everyman
Isn't
story.
that heartbreaking to discover that, though?
You know, there's good and bad. You know, the bad part of that is, wait, I'm not unique?
Well, we invest so much energy in that story, you know?
Well, and Mom told me, and still tells me at the age of 48 how unique I am.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, right. It's coming to understand that I might be unique in certain things, but in this story, I am telling the everyman story. And I'll never forget the gentleman who runs the police force in Wisconsin. I was out in D.C. I got the pleasure of talking at the Department of Health and Human Services to 30 professionals and government workers. And we went to dinner that night, and I said, well, you know, John, my story's not unique. And he literally poked a finger in my face and said, yeah, but you're the one telling it.
Right.
And that's the awareness piece. Tens of millions of men can have this story, but if we're shoving it under the rug and just sort of pretending like nothing's happening, wink, wink, nod, nod, we won't talk about those nasty little things, we're not helping anybody. Right. So awareness is stage one. Stage two, I think we're getting to now, because awareness is being helped. The feminist movement, #MeToo, all this stuff, it's really bubbled up to the surface, right? Where are men at, good or bad? Toxic versus healthy masculinity.
Again, more labels.
Yes, again, yeah, because masculinity just is.
Right.
It just is until we decide what it is or isn't. So right now we're in kind of phase two, I believe, which is building an army of servant warriors. And to me, it is that servant's heart. And that's sort of the piece men miss. You know, a servant warrior, a servant to me is humility, humble, right? Willing to serve others at all costs. But a warrior, that's a man who's going to fiercely, you know, go about this journey of life. But unfortunately, warrior has gotten kind of twisted, you know.
Well, we imply a lot of ego-based, masculine-derived sort of imagery around that. But I think it's a perfect word, you know. When I look at my own journey, you know, part of my evolvement, and I know yours has been too, is really about the service we offer to other people. And when I think about this work, and what I love in talking with you today is, and I saw it from the very beginning, I mean, your passion is evident in everything you do, and I think I told you from the beginning, we got to make this bigger. You know, like, how do we make this bigger? You need to be on more stages and do more stuff. Here I was trying to direct you in the work that you're so beautifully doing.
Thanks for pushing me, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I do that. But, you know, I think the beautiful thing about this is Be Men is trying to meet people where they are. And I think being able to look at, you know, divorce was my path, and it may not be everybody's path, but there's a way to connect people. You know, the Communities Connected podcast and the work we're doing at the Connection Project, I think what's so important is we start letting people know they're not alone. You know, Be Men may not be a great organization for every man out there, but it may be a great organization for one man or 20 men or how many ever. And I think that's really where the heart of this starts. Like, how do we get people a place to get plugged in and get connected? One thing that you and I had talked about when we last met for coffee was your surprise of how many women have really showed up to be a part of this movement that you've got. Let's talk about that, because I don't want this to be an exclusive conversation that women aren't welcome in. And I know you've found some surprises with that, and tell us about it. Yeah,
well, here's what to me is just fascinating. I've had this conversation hundreds and hundreds of times, right, over the last decade. Anytime I've ever had this conversation with a woman, she just like jumps out of her skin. It doesn't take very long, and she's doing backflips and yahoos. And I've had many women say, okay, just a moment. I just want to check something. So you're a guy, and you're trying to build a men's organization. And the goal of this men's organization is like men serving men to build better men.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, am I not communicating well? Yeah, that's exactly what I said. Okay, well, I just wanted to check if you were for real and you weren't like some sort of white unicorn, because I've never heard of anything like that. Right. And then the first thing that I started seeing over and over and over again is women really, really, really want men to be better.
Absolutely.
You know?
But I think as people, don't we all want to be better?
I think so. And so we've gotten so divisive about gender. Well, women want this, so therefore men can't want that, right? But we're all humans. You know, we've talked so much about our differences, and yet 85 to 90% of us are exactly the same, no matter the gender. And so women have really come to the table and said, oh, this is awesome. This is great. How do I support you guys? How do I get involved? And I'm like, well, technically it is a men's organization. But the tipping point for me was about 8 years ago, speaking at the state level. It was a really great moment that shocked me. And I was talking about Be Men and talking about our code of values, the way of the warrior. And I got done, and a middle-aged woman walked right up to me, very strong lady, and literally just boom, right between the eyeballs, and said, great talk, don't make it a secret. And I was like, okay.
Sounds like what I told you.
Yeah, elaborate. I knew what you meant. I didn't know what she meant. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? She said, well, you know, your society. And then I caught it, right? A secret society for men. I said, well, why do you tell me this? She said, well, look, I run a battered women's shelter here in Denver. I'm like, well, thank you for your work. I hope we could put you out of business. She said, but I'm there tomorrow with one of my female associates at the water cooler, and Be Men comes up. And she or I say, oh, Be Men, the whole bunch of he-men, woman-hating, chauvinistic pigs. I'm like, no, what, did you not hear the code of values? She said, no, I heard you. Have you noticed that people can assume negative things? If we don't know about you and you're a secret, we could assume whatever we want. Right. And I thought, oh boy, now I got a problem, right, Jason? I'm building this men's organization. I want all humans, women or men, to support this. Right. But if a whole section of humans, all the women, won't support it, how do we deal with that? So we created layers. So we've got a public-facing website. We've got a growing online community on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And here's what's amazing. 25% of those members are women.
Wow.
Yeah. So we had to create a layer to create some transparency, so women could see in to what the organization is and what it's about, so they could support it. Right. And they could advocate for it. Because at the end of the day, women know men I don't know. In fact, women know men I'll never know.
Correct.
But should those men know about Be Men and it not be a secret, like you told me? Get up on a bigger platform.
Right. I think that's great work. I love it. So tell me, with everything that you're doing and all the hats you're wearing, how do you navigate finding balance and maintaining balance in all of this? Like, what's your practice?
Oh man, that is a 15-year journey of personal growth and self-development, and even just this week I felt it. And so to any man or woman that's listening to this, the feeling of feeling overwhelmed in life is a very normal feeling.
Right.
You know, this is not an alone thing. That's a lie. It's hundreds of millions of us feeling this. You know, because at the end of the day, we do have a split family, and our sons, we handle them via joint custody. They've been living with me every other week. For a decade now. Okay. So I find myself kind of sprinting most days from about 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. and it can be exhausting.
I'm sure.
So the only thing that I have figured out as, and I won't say it's the solution, but maybe it's the practice, is to bookend my days. Okay. And so if I'm having a really good day that I am managing, you know, healthily, then I'm getting up and I do 1 mile running every morning. It's not how far can I go, it's the discipline of could I do this daily.
Okay.
It gets this older body moving again, right? All those injuries and crazy things that I did as in my youth. And then I will do some stretching, right? And some meditation, which is about my mind and my spirit. And then at the end of the day, I do a gratitude journal. I learned, you know, it's not, guys, you know, it's not fluffy bunnies and rainbows and essays. It's bullet pointed, it's a black book, and it's called Great Things Today. And it's to remind me every good thing that happened that day.
I love that. You know, that's so important. And I have a gratitude journal that I keep too, and really just to mirror that, it's just good stuff. Some days are better than others.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I think the things that we should highlight, and you'll probably agree with the sentiments here, is doing things committedly and consistently as a practice is what really adds up in the long haul. Sounds like you're doing that with your exercise and with the practices that you've got. Tell us, as we're wrapping up here, how can people get connected with Be Men if they want to learn more about it or get involved? Yeah,
well, and that's that piece that we're using all these technological gizmos that have us interconnected across the universe and across the world, but yet we're more disconnected than we've ever been on a humanitarian level.
Absolutely.
We're trying to do both. So you can find us on our website, you know, bemen.org, but you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And our handle is @BemenBrothers. Okay. So we've got all of that going on. And then, you know, once you get in, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, you know, my joke is you want to take the red pill or the blue pill, you can go as far as you'd like. We're seeking volunteers, we're seeking new members on that online community, but then we're hosting, right? Okay. We're doing events. So they're experiential events. So we just started a continuity event that we're going to do every month called Beers, Bros, and Bucks.
Okay.
So it's kind of a neat way. I mean, obviously, since age has gone by, men kind of get together and throw a couple down and watch a game or this or that. So think of it kind of like happy hour with a purpose. Okay. So it's bringing men together again to have these substantive conversations. If they're not going to go to their general physician, unless they're bleeding or, you know, they can't walk, and then, of course, they're not going to go see a therapist or a counselor or a psychotherapist about their mental health, what if we can kind of bring them into an event that they would go to anyway, have a little bit of fun, do a little bit of socializing, but then have a deep dive, a safe conversation in a container that they know they can open up about the stuff that really matters.
That's fantastic. I love it. So to wrap this up, I have one final question that's going to be real short, but first I want to say I hope everybody joins us for the Man Map, a guide to providing, surviving, and thriving on May 16th. Zach's going to be one of our panelists there. You can come and learn more about his story. It'll be an informal panel discussion. We're super excited to do this work together, and thank you for your time today. And as we drive this home, what's one thing you're grateful for today?
Oh, wow. One thing. Just one.
I don't need a list, just one.
Just one. You know, this might be it. I woke up this morning, I'm alive, I get to share time with a gentleman like yourself and enjoy this day.
That means a lot. I appreciate it, and I feel the same. Thanks you for being here.